everyone. Thank you for joining us at the Sacred Heart Community Service and Safe, Secure, and Love presentation. We're gonna wait a couple minutes, see if some more folks trickle in, and then we'll get started. We'll get started in a couple minutes. Feel free to start introducing yourself in the chat as we wait for more folks to come in. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. I kind of like that it's a small and intimate group because we can have some more interaction. For the most part, we're going to be sharing with you about Sacred Heart Community Service and Safe, Secure, and Love Resilient Families. But before we get started, we're gonna have a chance for everyone to introduce themselves, just because it's a smaller group, and I'd love to just know. We'd love to know who's in the room. And so I can start, and then I'll pass it to someone else. So hopefully, if you're there, if you're listening, we'd love to know who you are. So my name is Roberto Gil. I am the I'm wearing two hats in this presentation. So one of my hats is through Sacred Heart Community Service. I'm the Director of Organizational Development at Sacred Heart. Sacred Heart Community Service is the community action agency for Santa Clara County. But I'm also wearing the hat as the Executive Director for Safe, Secure, and Love. Was really involved, and you'll hear more about this as I go through my parts of the presentation. In bringing Safe, Secure, and Love to Sacred Heart Community Service, and has been such a great addition. But also on my time outside of Sacred Heart, I support the development, continue to grow this program outside of Sacred Heart, and working closely with Dr. Burns. But yeah, so my name is Roberto Gil, and my pronouns are he, him, and I'm happy to be here with you. And then I'm gonna pass it to Barbara.
Hi, I'm Barbara Burns. I'm a professor at Santa Clara University in the Department of Child Studies. And I have been working with Sacred Heart Community Service and Roberto in particular for more than 12 years. And when we were working together for 4 or 5 years, we used to joke and say, oh no, it's been 10 years, it's been 20 years. I don't know why we were joking then, because now it seems like 50 years, but it's all good. It's all good. And so my life's work is on promoting family strengths, and especially in young children. And so I have been working on trying to develop a program that would be community supported and community led. So a real support, not just the target of the community, but the community taking agency for the program for my entire career. And I've been so lucky to be able to connect with Vero and Roberto and the Sacred Heart Community Service team in order to work with them these years. And I'll pass it to Veronica.
Thank you, Dr. Burns. Hi, everyone. My name is Veronica Amador, and I'm also here representing Sacred Heart Community Service. And I started off actually as the early childhood analyst for SSL about 4.5 years ago, almost 5. And so even though my role has evolved into a different space, I continue to support this program in a different capacity. I'm very excited to be here with you all.
Again, we're here. We're a very interdisciplinary team. Right now we have Veronica presenting from Veronica's here as the director of the department where Safe, Secure, and Love lives, and Barbara is our researcher, founder, partner for this. And then even myself, I work at Sacred Heart, but I'm in another department doing other work now, and I'm still heavily involved with Safe, Secure, and Love. So and then we work very closely with community, as you're going to hear through our presentation. And part of that is like that actually is one of the transformational pieces I love of the work we've done with Safe, Secure, and Love and incorporated Sacred Heart, that it isn't just one entity owning this, right? It's really co-led, co-owned, co-developed, and everyone has a very important part in it. So next slide, please. you know, we've introduced ourselves. We'll share the slides after, so you'll get to read more about like just the wonderful people that we are and how much we really care and love what we do, right? Like the impact we want to have. Everyone in the room is here because they care deeply about children and families and wanting to make a change. But I also want to preface, as we're talking about how to incorporate practices to really support the well-being of children and families, right? And that's what I want to kind of invite everyone to be open to that, because especially if you've been longer in the work, you know how challenging that really is, especially as you work with more impacted families. All families, regardless of status, economic level, everything, this information throughout our presentation and the work we do is relevant to everyone. At Sacred Heart Community Service, we work with families that are deeply impacted by different systems, right, and adversities. But we believe that, you know, this work that we're doing about transformation, we have to do it as a community and together, right? So be open to that, and you'll hear that through our theme. So our session objectives is to learn more for you to learn more about our promotora led programs, which is our promotora as our community leaders. Link between caregiver resilience and and nurturing caregiving behaviors, the use of mindfulness and self-compassion practices, evidence for impact of SSL on caregiver strengths and resilience, understand why Sacred Heart Communities adopted a community healing community approach model, and it called SSL, like why did we choose, or how did Safe, Secure, and Love come to us? Because it wasn't just our choice, right? As Barbara will talk more about that. To strengthen families and promote healthy early child development. Next slide, please. And then I'll pass it to Barbara.
Great, great. So as you may have intuited from our introduction, we've been working together for a long time, but since 2018, we've been also in partnership with Santa Clara County Department of Family and Children's Services in order to provide for the community, an intervention that would both support caregivers, support families, and also prevent child maltreatment, and especially child neglect. So the goal of this intervention, this goal of this program that we're going to unpack for you, is to strengthen family functioning, strengthen caregivers' nurturing abilities, strengthen their confidence in themselves, strengthen, their inner, we call them inner strengths a lot. We're doing that in order to prevent child maltreatment. So this idea of building family resilience, you're going to hear a lot. And so we're trying to build resilience in the face of economic stress and trauma. So we have this 7-workshop program that's 2 hours for each workshop. And today we're mostly going to be talking about the data from the program for caregivers of children 0 to 3. But Jessica, we have another program for children, for caregivers of children 3 to 6. And that's a different talk, but it has a similar roots to all of this. So when you introduced yourselves, I know that Vero and Roberto went, oh, yes, Jessica, we want her to be our new best friend. Anyway, in this workshop, caregivers are learning the sort of pillars, the 3 components of resilience, which is stress management. That's a very important part of resilience. A second is relationships or responsive caregiving. When you're talking about resilience of caregivers, being responsive, being able to make connections with their child, and being able to better understand their child's emotional development in order to promote secure attachment and preventing neglect. That's all part of these workshops. And again, there are a lot of interventions that exist that are parent education that have to do with many of these topics. And people call them trauma informed. I like to call them resilience informed. But this is not, the content of the programming is built on a strong scientific evidence of what promotes resilience in caregivers. And the more resilient the caregivers are, we're going to see that that supports healthy child development because it supports healthy family functioning. But what's different about this program is that it's promotora led, meaning that, as I said in the very beginning, when we call this a community supported program, when we say, or community-based intervention, we're not just saying it's focused on the community such that the target is the community. And we're not just focused on individual characteristics of caregivers, or in the context of trying to prevent child maltreatment. We're not just interested in characteristics of victims or abusers. We're interested in community as the force, the agency by which healing happens, education is spread, and communities are made more resilient. So it's a promotora-led program, and we know that caregivers relate to and trust the experiences of other parents and caregivers. And the promotoras in our program attended our program initially, and then got so interested, wanted more training, enrolled in future training courses, and became leaders in the program. And so we see this every day, that promotoras are bridges and connectors that fill the cultural and social gaps that make this program, or make any program, but in particular, we're talking about Safe, Secure, and Love, making it accessible and relevant to the community. So again, you're going to hear over and over me say a community healing, community intervention or program. And that's because it's the case that the community is leading the force and the transformation. Great, next slide. And this slide just captures the centrality of the promotora model. So it's the case that if you start at the top of the circle, where there's an anchor at the top, it's the case that promotoras, they complete the program, they graduate from the program, and they become more interested in more and more training. They become better advocates for the community, and continue transforming in terms of the more they're teaching in the community and connecting with the community, the more they're able to understand and share the needs of the community. And this kind of training and support for promotoras is a central part of the program. Next slide. Okay. So what does that mean, community healing program? And how does it differ? So on the left side of the slide, we have a representation of a caregiver with a small child. And those arrows are meant to represent the challenges, the stress, the racism, the poverty that is impacting that relationship between caregivers and their children. On the right side, we see that in Safe, Secure, and Love, we still have that same caregiver and child in the middle, but there are other people that are both taking the class, taking the workshops with them, and also teaching the class and sharing and leading the discussion. And the conception here is that just being in a group led by community allows a kind of an insulation to some of those adversities that are affecting day-to-day caregiving. And then the fact that we've got those arrows now pushing back on the adversities, that is trying to capture this idea that it really captures why we see this as why this is a new approach, and it represents some new thinking, because we're arguing that we're not just trying to change behaviors of parents and or caregivers. We're not just trying to change behaviors. We're trying to build capacity, yes, of caregivers, but we're trying to also build community capacity. And that's the critical component here of this kind of approach. So in the public health world and in the psychology world, we talk about the idea that these are both neighborhood level factors and community factors that we're trying to support, as well as family and child factors. So it's a different way of thinking about how you approach the challenges of promoting parent education. Okay, next slide. So this just captures the whole model, and very quickly we start at the top where it says chronic stress. As I've already said, the issue is in the context of chronic stress, caregiving and supporting healthy family functioning is really challenged. So that is a given. That's a given for everyone, and it's an international problem, not just a local or national problem. And so what we've done is take the principles for family resilience. Remember, I said stress management, responsive relationships, and life skills or executive function skills, planning skills. The more you can support those aspects of thinking and functioning, the more you can support resilience. So basically, we took those principles for family resilience and we supported it in the context of learning about what children need for healthy family functioning. So we're both trying to support caregiver resilience and learn about what children need in order to function and be more resilient. And that's in the blue area. And then we go down and you see that, yes, we build that blue model of taking the science of resilience and combining it with the science of early child development. But then we turned it into the purple community-led parent education, community-led, in which the community then provides the process of learning. So again, that's in a nutshell, that describes the process of how we got to this program, Safe, Secure, and Loved. Okay. So, I mean, I think this is true for all ages, and even if you're not a caregiver of a teenager, it's true, and actually even older. But when we're able, we know from the science of resilience that when we're able to manage stress, manage challenges, manage adversities, we can then be better caregivers. We can work to support sensitive interactions. And I'll just give a teaser in terms of, again, what are people learning in these workshops? They're learning something we call habits of resilience, but that captures the idea that there are some habits or behaviors that can bring out inner strengths of caregivers that are linked to resilience. And so caregivers learn how better to reach out and connect, give comfort and care to children. They also learn ways to have more self-compassion and receive comfort and care. And again, self-compassion and mindfulness are a key thread through all of the workshops. They're able to both practice and learn how to repair and recover from disruptions in interactions. Because in fact, to be a caregiver is to mess up and is to have problems, or to be human is to have challenges and learn from them. But the trick is to recognize how to repair the connection you have with your child. That's very important. And then we learn in the workshops more on reflecting on our inner strengths and how we are learning in community, how our connections across community are really both supporting our caregiving and supporting our own confidence and ambition. Let's see. So what you're going to hear next is you're going to hear some of the data that we collected before and after people complete this program. And you're going to hear about their evaluation of the program. Are they satisfied? Did it have value for their family? Would they recommend it to others? But you're also going to see that there were changes in actual strengths of the caregiver that both have to do with the individual capacity of the caregivers and the neighborhood level, social support, concrete support, other variables that reflect this idea of community healing community. And now I'll turn it back, I believe, to my colleagues.
Thank you, Dr. Burns. It does a really odd thing when you're presenting, but thank you. Thank you so much for going over a little bit about SSL and grounding us. And like Dr. Burns said, how do we know we're doing what we said we're doing, right? And one of the core components in being able to work in collaboration with Dr. Burns has given us the tools to be data driven and be able to say, is this actually impactful, right? Because I can tell you, I can put you in one of those workshops and I guarantee you will fall in love. And at the end of the day, as much as I want to bring funders and I want to bring, everyone to sit on the workshop, I also want to make sure that we know we're capturing both on what it's happening in community and as well as with our promotoras. So one of the evaluation process that we do, all caregivers or all participants take a pre and a post test, and it's centered around the protective factors, which is I believe, if you're not common with it, if you put a protective factor survey, it will come up. And then there's the second part of the evaluation. And the second part is what I'm talking right now, which is kind of like a narrative. And if they were satisfied, if people were satisfied, and in every one of our workshops, we do this quarterly workshops. We run between 8 to 15 workshops quarterly. And the satisfaction ratings have been at 100%, have been at 99, right? Would you recommend this to someone else? 99. Has the program helped your family? Like beyond really thinking about those protective factors in building resilience? Has it actually, like, do you think it helped your family? And we're often between 100% to 99%. Some of the comments, we also leave it up for comments for folks to talk about, like, what was impactful to them. And people are talking about, I would definitely recommend the program, very educational. These workshops are very necessary for families. And the comments are not just one or two participants. We get about maybe 80 to 95% of the participants that take the evaluation put us a comment. We then segregate those into themes to see what are the themes that are coming up for that quarter, and then eventually a whole year evaluation. But this is one of the core aspects of the program as well. The second one is on the family protective factors, right? The family functioning and resiliency. Within the family function resiliency, although I didn't put the questions here, and you're seeing only a pre and a post survey for the means, we actually do a deeper analysis into the pre and the post on the t-test, on the SD, the CI, the p-value, and the coherency. And we have reports for that as well to share if anybody's interested. But within the family functional resiliency, we ask questions around, my family talks about problems, right? As you can see in the pre, most of them are pretty high, saying like possibly, but on the post, they're talking more about it, right? It's something that is coming more often. Another one is we pull together when things are stressful. Again, this is an average mean, but within the pre, we see the same thing. The next one is the social support. And within the social support is I have others who listen when I need to talk. Folks feeling, again, building that of community, right? Do I have anybody else? Many, our program is tailored for communities. The majority of the community currently that is coming to our programs are within the Latinx, Hispanic demographic, monolingual Spanish speakers, but they are many of them isolated. Although we're within the same culture, within the same community, the isolation is real. And so being able to say, I have others who listen to me when I talk is profound, right? And either they found it within their group or they have found that within their promotora, who is that community participant who once was there on their seat and has taken on a leadership role. Within the social support, we also ask about crisis. I have someone to talk if a crisis appears. When I feel lonely, I have someone to talk to. Again, something very important. One of my favorite ones is the concrete support, because concrete supports really allows to support folks and being able to get them connected. And it goes with that social support. And the concrete support, it talks about, I know where to turn for food and housing. Sacred Heart Community Service, one of our highlights of the services that we provide is a food pantry. But then we also have other areas within Sacred Heart, like employment seeking, other services that folks don't know about, like SSL being part of our family support network. And so when folks are coming in, as you can see, this is from our last year data, they were very low on that concrete support, right? I know where to go to make ends meet. I know where to find a job. But when they come out, they know where to find those. And it's because, again, that leadership development that happens within our promotoras to be able to disseminate the resources and continue to support folks and make a space where folks are feeling comfortable to ask, like, hey, I need help with rent, or I need help getting a resume or application. And either they might share it with their group, or they might feel comfortable sharing it with the promotora, and the promotora can guide them. The group can guide them as well. And so building that. The next part is child development, knowing of child development and parent knowledge. And that goes into, I am confident in the role as a parent. I know how to help my child learn. My child misbehaves just to upset me. And again, this is something that, I'm a child development major, but when I became a mom, I was like, what is this, right? Like the whole book just went off the door, and this was a new concept. And being able to learn within community, being able to be around community and talking about what is knowing how to how to respond to my child is so essential, as when we think about combating any kind of misbehaving or any other maltreatment and abuse within a parent to children. And the last one is the nurturing and attachment, which is the family resilience. My family, I praise my child when he behaves well, when I discipline my child, when I am happy being with my child and I are close, I'm able to soothe my child. And so again, being able to see that nurturing and attachment getting stronger within as folks progress and finish this series of workshops. And I will pass it over to Roberto.
All right. So I think just I love hearing the data, right? It just really, I've been, like Barbara says, we've been working together for like 50 years, right? Like for the last 12 years. And to me, listening and hearing about this program is not just about the data. The data is really important, but it's actually seeing the real life transformation in families, right? Like coming as being a person who has a high A score, who has a lot of lived experience, who does this work because of those things, right? And then to see things change in people's lives, like the concrete supports that Veronica was talking about, right? Like to seeing that change in people's lives. And you'll learn more about Sacred Heart Community Service in the next few slides, but we work in an organization that is deeply it's embedded in our goals and in our mission to work with community. And when you see that transformation, when you hear the hardship, right? A lot of it, if you're working with families that are highly impacted by these different systems, you're going to hear those stories. You're going to feel those stories. And when you see the change, when you see these community healing, community models working, right? It just really transforms your life. So every time I get a chance to talk about this, I'm not just thinking about the data and the success of the program, I'm thinking about the families, right? And I think, again, grounding us in that. And the program is focused on caregiver. Oh, we'll go ahead. Yeah, next slide. Thank you. Let's go next slide. So one of the things that grounds us at Sacred Heart is our mission, right? And one of the things is like we believe that poverty is not inevitable, right? Poverty is like something that has been intentionally created in our society. And we believe that deeply, right? An organization has been around for 60 years. It started in 1964. Our founder lived in a wealthier, more privileged side of town, and she in 1964 was like, I want to address some serious issues in my community, and starting giving food and clothing out of her garage in this neighborhood. And she brought in people from her parish, and she said, hey, I need help doing this. So in the 1960s, 1964, the war on poverty, right, civil rights movement, all these things are very prevalent. And our founder, Louise Benson, said, hey, she also believed that poverty was inevitable, right? And she wanted to do something about it. And for us as an organization at Sacred Heart, part of that is really being interconnected with the community, right? So next slide, please. And so here are our values, right? These are our values that guide our work at our organization at Sacred Heart Community Service. Those of you that came late, Sacred Heart Community Service is a community action agency of Santa Clara County. We see over 70,000 people come through our doors for services, for volunteerism, to be engaged throughout the year. And these are our values: dignity, compassion, and respect, community united, leadership development, social justice learning, and volunteerism. So dignity, compassion, and respect is a really core value for us, right? Like anyone that comes through our doors, anyone that gets involved with us, this is what we believe. Anything we do around training, around engagement for our work. It's about dignity, compassion, and respect. And we believe that everyone deserves that, right? All of us, everyone deserves a right to live with dignity and opportunity, right? And just some of the data on the right? This is from our current annual report. And it holds some data, right? As a community action agency of Santa Clara County, part of our role, right? Like as a federal designee for this is to really understand how poverty affects how poverty affects our county, and for us to take action against that, right? And a lot of the times the action that's designed for this is around treating symptoms, and that's how we're designed, right? And this is actually one of the ways that we became more in relationship with our working collaborative with the Department of Family Children Services for the county, was because the county was interested, right? And I know a lot of counties and a lot of movement towards treating being more preventative, addressing these problems more upstream. Um, this is how we came into connection, because that's what we believe at Sacred Heart. How are we addressing the root causes? And one of the things I want to highlight, which always comes up in this work, in my over 20 years of doing this work, it's always like a scarcity of resources, right? Like we're battling for these, for the crumbs, right? And one of the things in this data report, like this data that shows up in our county, there's $598 billion of wealth in Silicon Valley, right? So I think it's like for us, it's like for me, that's the premise of like, again, how poverty is inevitable, right? It's not inevitable. And we are doing something, and it makes our work that much harder to do and combat this. But it's also what motivates me and pushes me for us to do the work where we're treating the symptoms and the immediate need of folks, but also at the same time we're treating and we're fighting against the conditions that cause people to live this way. When we know there's enough resources in the world and in our immediate areas to actually treat this. And again, I want to set that as a premise of why we do the work we do at Sacred Heart, and why we're looking to be just more than a social justice, like a social services agency. We're a poverty fighting, anti-racist social justice organization taking action against poverty, right? Taking action against oppression. Next slide, please. The other one I think that's very foundational in our work, and it really speaks to the alignment with Safe, Secure, and Love, is our Community United value. Like we truly believe that we can address and take action against poverty if we don't do it together. That is everyone across the board, right? And I think one of the historical points of Community United for us, not only for Sacred Heart, right? And my story about our founder and how she got a bunch of people together and just built this from the ground, built this just from wanting to take action against her seeing people suffering in her community, right? And then to build it to where we are now, right? 60 years later. But it's also, we see this throughout many social movements, right? Like we see it through, if many of you wrote for organizations and children are getting free and reduced lunches, right? That comes from someone fighting for that, right? Like the Black Panthers, right? A lot of the free and reduced lunch from USD and the federal government comes from these folks that were like, we want better for our community. We're going to fight back. And then later on, people are like, yeah, children should have food at school. Wow, what a concept, right? But it comes from that. But we believe in that. We do this together as a collective, and our promotoras, our promotores, promotoras are aligned to that. Like our community leaders are a big part of that. So next slide, please. The other aspect of our work that's really important, another value, is leadership development, right? Like I like to talk about this not in the form of like we are the beacons of skills and knowledge and we're going to pass these on to you, but we want a space that collectively we're growing, we're building skills and learning to be the best we can, and we're also incubating a space where our leaders get to do that. I often see how many over the years have often seen how so many of our leaders, right, promotoras come into this work, and they come into their power, right? They come into their leadership. They already have some skills. They just needed a space that can see those, right? And they can shine. And just the other day, I've been at Sacred Heart for 18 years, and I was in our warehouse, our pantry, and one of our promotoras was being interviewed for a story, right? And she's a leader. She's a promotora in Safe, Secure, and Love, but she's also involved in a lot of other work throughout the agency, and she sees me, and I've known her since the first day I started at Sacred Heart. And she says, "Hey, Roberto, remember when I did my first interview?" I didn't remember her first interview. It was probably like 12 years ago. And I just nodded my head with a smile. And she's like, "I'm so much better now." She's like, "I'm so much better." And just the pride and joy, right? And I'm like, that's so amazing. And there's so many stories of that. And we're not only creating a space for that, like Safe, Secure, and Love has a whole model and program around training and developing and supporting the promotoras to learn the practices, but we also know that they come in with a lot of these skills already, right? And that's a big part. That's a strong value for us, not just in Safe, Secure, and Love, but the whole organization. Next slide, please. And then, I think social justice is one, like, it's kind of thematic over what we've been talking about, right? And what I've been sharing. But I think that this is an important component of Sacred Heart, in Safe, Secure, and Love, that um, at the same time that we're working on the symptoms and conditions that make life harder for family and children, right? We have to also work on our commitment to social justice and solidarity. One of the things that we as we were preparing for this, Veronica and I were talking about, like, the building of social capital too, how important that is, right? And how our community is really isolated, and I believe that that's intentional too, right? The isolation of our community, why toxic stress shows up in our community, is intentional. And what we're all trying to do in this space, like most of us, like as we've heard from some of you, what you do, and like your background of working with families and children, we know that that's really hard to combat, right? Because people are just, for some of us working with families that are deeply impacted by these systems, they're just surviving. But a lot of them are alone, right? And part of us being committed to social justice is like, we want to bring people together, create spaces for mutual support, empower them, and then but also take action against these problems, right? Like, so that's a big part of our basis. So embedded in all of our work across Sacred Heart, we do a lot of social justice learning. We're on this path of working to be a fully inclusive anti-racist organization, which means that we're addressing these things in our system that, and I keep saying it again, right? It makes lives harder for people, it oppresses them, and this is historical, right? So for us, like, if we really are a poverty fighting organization and want to change people's lives, then we gotta really build towards that, right? And working with, say, Secure and Love, these last 50 years, 12 years. um for those of you that came in later, Dr. Burns and I always joke that, we've been working 12 years, but we always add like 10, 15 years to it, because it's been really profound work. But like, um, you know, well, going back to what I was gonna say, social justice learning is across the board at Sacred Heart, right? Because we want our staff and our community to really understand, like, where it comes from, but why is all this embedded in our mission? Why are we doing this, right? Why is this work so important? Because as it is, it's hard already to deal with the day to day. And then the other thing for our organization, just historically, volunteerism is really important. And we think that's important to share with y'all, because we know in a lot of schools, in a lot of organizations that are working with families and children, you have family and caregiver engagement, goals, right? And so there's a lot of this is embedded, like our practice and our intentionality to work with parents is really about also promoting like this whole like it takes a village, right? It's a community united to really make something to impact these challenges and adversities that families deal with every year. So this is really about about us just continuing to chip away in these harder systems. But I think the more of us that do it as institutions that really work on like how do we transform, right? How do we keep building this to really make again the conditions for families to have all the opportunities in our society to be there for them. Like we have to continue to be innovative, creative, and then work together, right? Earlier I was saying we have a very strong interdisciplinary team. So we have community leaders, right? So we have community leaders that we call promotoras that work with us. We have our nonprofit staff and practitioners. We work with the local government and county folks. And then we're also working with Dr. Burns, who's a researcher and developer of this program. So working collectively really helps too. And then next slide, please.
Yes, and before we go into the next slide, I really want to highlight also we through the promotoras who have children also in elementary schools, we've taken SSL now to actually Alexander, if you're still here with us, to Luther Burbank. Luther Burbank is one of our school districts that has supported us in the past year in allowing us to bring over Safe, Secure, and Love. And so something that we've noticed as well, and as we continue to talk to the administration, is that commitment of voluntarism, right? Like maybe PTA, it's not for the parent yet because they don't see a role there yet. But when they start taking these classes and they're like, oh, I can become a promotora. Oh, do you know that, I'm a promotora and I'm also a PTA. Do you want to come? It's that invitation from community that I think it's the hand warm bath that allows folks to feel more invited and more inclusive into the environment. And so these are conversations that we're actively having with the school districts as well on like how Safe, Secure, and Love it's also taking a turn within when we take it into the school district. So again, a different lens into the way that not that Safe, Secure, and Love provides all the skills, but rather shines already as a mirror to many of the skills and experiences that parents and families are taking, the participants who are taking these classes already bring with them. And we allow the space for them to continue evolving with them.
All right. And so just as a final call to action, we think you too can transform systems and relationships, right? We've been saying that together we have the power to do it. We also invite you later on to, you want to come learn more about Sacred Heart Community Service and what's happening at Safe, Secure, and Love at Sacred Heart or in San Jose or in Santa Clara County. We invite you. Barbara and I have been in a lot of spaces where we're like, hey, come and check it out. We've been in spaces where they're like, oh, it looks very similar to this, or we're doing something like that. And I say, just come, we invite you, come to our space, come see what we're doing. And then you see a little deeper, right? Like how the data we shared earlier is showing up in reality, right? In real time with families in the workshops. You just taking time to speak to some of the promotoras and some of the community leaders and see what they're doing in this program. But we hope that this becomes a call to action. If you're already doing this in your organization, or at your school or at your child development center, great, right? Keep doing it, keep going, embedded in everything you do, in your mission and your values, because we all need to do that collectively to really change the conditions in the lives of children. And the other thing to really stress is like the data telling the story is really key, right? I want to emphasize that the data telling the story is really key, because I think that influences us and allows us more to really invest in this work. We know the resources are out there, they don't always come our way. But we got to all collectively keep fighting that. But definitely keep this is also a call to action to keep working on that transformation, and then also building the relationships with the community. So I want to invite Veronica and Barbara to add any other closing pieces before we go into Q&A as well.
I found this very inspirational. I'll just add one little piece, and that is that, when I think about school systems, and I think about the way we've worked in the past with in other places with more school systems and Head Start and early Head Start, but it's almost like what we're laying out for you to think about is a different way of thinking about the solution to some of the challenges you're facing, whether it's in interacting and connecting with parents, whether it's supporting children of parents facing a lot of stress. We're saying we want to think about it differently, that the solution is in the community. That's where the solution is. That doesn't mean there aren't important things to be collaborating on with the community, but it's a different way of thinking. And I think we have been stuck for many, many years. And this actually what led me to years and years ago trying to begin a community supported and community led program. We've been stuck with a top-down model of how we're going to support children, how we're going to support families. And in fact, we were looking at the problem, looking for the wrong solution, and so I just want to lay that out, that this is a different way of thinking about how you're going to support children and families. And I think, we would love for you all to, we could put you all in one car and take you to Sacred Heart Community Services now. Vera, you can have the last word.
Thank you, Dr. Burns. And yes, all are invited to come in and really experience it as well. And just, talking back about what Dr. Burns talked about, that the healing community model, that we find the solutions within the community. That work is hard. That work is really hard. But I also want to lend a hand that you're not alone, that we are here also to continue to support that, because it is important, because it is within our values. But again, because it is for a shared responsibility that we have to children and families. And so with that, I want to thank you all for joining us. I will close the PowerPoint and stop sharing screen. So for any questions or comments that you all have.